Hi, good evening. Welcome back to St. Peter's in Hove. I'm Father Alexander. We're taking another step on our journey through the Bible. We're in the book of Genesis, and we've got to the stories about Jacob and Esau. Now, Jacob and Esau are rivals. Jacob does the dirty on Esau and deprives him of his birthright. Esau is condemned to serve Jacob until such a time as Esau will rebel, we're told. What's all this about is partly, maybe wholly, the fact that the Israelites and the Edomites didn't like each other. The Edomites were subjected to the Israelites, and the Edomites rebelled roughly after the time of King Solomon. And of course, Jacob is the progenitor of the Israelites, and Esau, his twin brother, is the progenitor of the Edomites. The Edomites are really rather bad people. As we'll find out later in the Bible. The most famous Edomite in the Bible is, of course, King Herod the Great and his family. So Edomites, bad people. So that's what it's explaining to us. It's not very interesting. The story is quite dramatic about how Jacob does the dirty on his brother with the help of his mother, who is a schemer. He's a schemer as well, but yet he's chosen by God. Anyway, he has to avoid his brother, so off he goes to Haran to meet up with his uncle, who's got some daughters, so he can marry one of his daughters. And again, you have the idea of marrying in being very important. What I want to focus on is something much more important, and that is chapter 28, verses 10 to the end of the chapter. Now, this is Jacob's religious experience. Jacob is going to Haran. He reaches a certain place and he stops there for the night, and he has a dream. Well, he has more than a dream. He has a vision. There was a ladder planted on the ground with its top reaching to heaven, and God's angels were going up and down it. And there was the Lord standing beside him and saying, I, the Lord, am the God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying I shall give to you and your descendants. So a reiteration of the famous promise. Your descendants will be as plentiful as the dust on the ground. Again, reiteration of the famous promise. You will spread out from east to west, north and south, and so on. And then when he wakes up, Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, truly, the Lord is in this place, and I did not know. Now that is really religious, that he went to sleep expecting just to go to sleep, and the Lord was there. Quite often we look for God, we don't find God, but quite often God comes to find us, and God finds us in a moment when we don't expect to be found by God. So the Lord was here, and I did not know. He was afraid, he was filled with awe, he was filled with religious reverence. And he says, in Latin it says, quam terribilis est locus iste. How terrible this place is, how awesome this place is. And this is nothing less than the abode of God and the gate of heaven. Hic est domus Dei et Janua Caeli. This is the home of God, the gate of heaven. Because he's seen this thing of the angels going up and down. So in other words, he's had an experience of heaven and earth being joined together. Now this phrase, how awesome is this place? This is the house of God and the gate of heaven. Quite often in Latin, these words are written above the altar in a Catholic church. In other words, Jacob has his experience of God. He feels what some people call that this is a sort of a thin place, a meeting place with the divine. And that is what we have in every Catholic church. We take this passage of the Old Testament completely out of context and we apply it to our churches. And therefore, when you are at Mass, it is as if the angels are going up and down the ladder. In other words, there is communication, because the angels are messengers, communication between heaven and earth. And the communication is made possible through the sacraments of the church. And then Jacob then takes a stone he'd been sleeping on, he sets it up as a pillar and he anoints it, pouring oil on top of it. And therefore that place becomes Bethel, the house of God, which was a temple for the Jews before they had the temple in Jerusalem. And then Jacob makes a vow and he carries on his journey. So for Jacob, this rather questionable character, this rather unpleasant character, this schemer, this fraudster, then goes on his way. This schemer, this fraudster, is able to have a religious experience, an experience of God. I wonder how many people actually have a genuine experience of God in prayer. Not Jacob, he didn't actually pray to God, God came to him. We must all pray that somehow or another God may come to us and touch us in our sleep or in our waking and make us aware of his presence. And I think I've said this many times in many different contexts. When you go into a church, you're not just going into an oddly decorated building, you're going into a place where God is present through the sacraments and above all in the Blessed Sacrament. And therefore, every time you go into church, you could make this your prayer. How awe-inspiring is this place? This is the house of God. This is the gateway to heaven. In other words, this is your big chance. The Lord was here and I did not know it. Well, I know it now. In other words, let us put ourselves in communication with God. Let's follow our ancestor in faith, Jacob, and communicate with God. All the very best. I'll talk about this, what happens to Jacob next, at our next steps along the way. Bye for now.